All right, so as we continue on in our lessons, then with fractions, we're going to get into lesson 3.4. Like 3.4 is taking what we learned in 3.3, which is I have to use a reciprocal when it comes to my fractions, and I can't divide fractions, so we have that saying of KFC. We're going to keep the first one, we're going to flip the second one, and then we're going to change from division to multiplication. Now, in this particular lesson, they ask you to create your own division problems. I'm not worried about you being able to create your own division problems. What I'm worried about is, can you understand the math that we're doing? Because I have to be able to take it and not only perform the division of fractions questions, but also then to apply that knowledge into story problems where I can end up with an answer that makes sense. So as we go through this lesson, then all I need to do is they're telling me a whole lot of words here saying, well, everything I've learned, I'm going to apply into this particular lesson. So what I want you to be able to say when we're done is well, I can divide a fraction by a fraction. Now, mathematically, we really can't, but I know how to change it into a math problem that I know I can do. And once again, they're going to set it up and they're going to show you how we could take a box and I can divide it into different pieces. Now, since I'm not starting with a whole, then notice that we have 1/2 divided by 1/3 in this first example. So they take the one box and they divide it into two pieces. It's that 1/2 piece that we're going to be working with when it comes to 1/3. So then they take it and they're like, well, I have to divide my whole into 1/3. This is where getting away from doing the math problem and trying to divide smaller boxes gets quite confusing. So when I start seeing that, well, I'm doing 1/3, but I'm doing 1/3 of a whole compared to 1/3 of the 1/2 that I have, then I don't want you to get all confused as to what we're doing. I want you to simply just be able to do the math that we're talking about. So when it comes to doing the math and I have 1/2 divided by 1/3, then I'm going to see that I can get the same answers as they did by drawing all those little boxes and dividing them up. I go through my process of KFC. I keep my first fraction of 1/2. I flip my second fraction, that's finding its reciprocal, which is 3/1. And then my division, I simply change to multiplication. And now that I have a multiplication of fractions questions, I ask myself, can I multiply fractions? Yes. What's my first step? I simply multiply across. Then I can simplify or convert if I need to. So when I multiply across, I end up with 1 times 3, which is 3 in my numerator, and 2 times 1, which is 2 in my denominator. Then I would have to divide because I have to convert it into a mixed number. So 3 goes inside my box. I'm dividing by the denominator of 2. 2 goes into 3 one time, which is 3. And I have a remainder of 1. And once again, my remainder is always my numerator. It's why I circle it so I know where it goes. And then my divisor, my outside number, is my denominator. It goes on the bottom. So we end up with the 1 and 1/2, which is exactly what they did when drawing boxes, but it becomes very confusing when I have to draw the boxes. Right. So as we look at the same type of math problem, and they're showing us that when we do all the work, this is what we should be able to end up with, but let's just simply do the math. When I have 3/4 and I'm dividing by 3/8, then I keep my 3/4 divided by 3/8. I know I'm going to KFC, so I keep my first fraction. My second one, I find its reciprocal, so I take 3/8 and I flip it. So I have 8/3. And then I know I started with division, so I need to change to multiplication. So then I can see if I can cross reduce. Remember, when we're multiplying, if we cross reduce first, our math numbers can go from really large to much smaller numbers to work with, and it would hopefully make my math easier. If it's easier for you to simply multiply across and do 3 times 8 is 24, and then 3 times 4 is 12, and reduce by converting 24 and 12 to see what you get, I'm fine with that because it's still going to make a lot of sense to you. But I like to cross reduce, especially when I get higher up in math and my problems become much bigger numbers than trying to divide and convert bigger numbers. I notice I have threes, and as I said, that's the same as reducing by threes, or you could just cross them out since it's the same number and put a 1 for both of them. As long as it's the same number in numerator and denominator, Remember, it cannot be two denominators or two numerators. It has to be one on top and one on bottom. As long as it's the same number, they're going to reduce to ones. Then I see that the 4 and 8s can be reduced because 4 will go into 4 evenly, 4 will go into 8 evenly. If you don't see that, then you could say, well, they're both even, so I can reduce by 2s. And that would give me 2 will go into 4 2 times, and 2 will go into, or 2 will go into 4 2 times, yeah. And 2 will go into 8 4 times. But then I still have 2 and 4, which can be reduced. If I just reduce by 4s, the first step, then I have 4 will go into 4 once, and 4 will go into 8 2 times. That leaves me with just multiplying across, which I get 2 over 1. And we know anytime we have a whole number over 1, it just becomes that whole number. So once again, we're proving that by doing all of the division of the small boxes, they got 2. If I just simply follow the pattern of KFC, I will get 2 as well. So I'm going to have you work on this check problem on your own. Remember, the videos are there for you to be able to rewatch, especially if you are like me and you struggle with your focus. Let's say you lost your focus. Go ahead and pause it and rewind it. Rewatch the section that you lost your focus on and take your notes, because understanding it is the key to math. Not just being able to say, oh, I saw what he did. I need you to be able to do it and understand it. So take your time, work out this problem, and then come back to me and see how you did. So hopefully you followed your pattern. If you had 7/9 divided by 2/3 and you told yourself, well, I know I can't divide fractions, so I need to KFC it. So I need to keep my first one, which I brought down my 7/9. I need to flip my second one, so I'm finding my reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3 over 2. And then I know that the C tells me I can't divide, so I need to change that to multiplication. Now, once again, if you want to multiply across and then convert and reduce, you can. That would give you 21 over 18 and 21 divided by 18. Then you'd have to work out the problem. But once again, I like to cross reduce anytime that I possibly can to make it with smaller numbers to deal with. So I see that 3 and 9 can both be cross reduced, and I know that 3 will go into both of them. So I'm going to take 3 into 9 3 times and 3 into 3, or 3 into itself, 1 time. That leaves me with multiplication, which I know I can do. I simply multiply across. I want to multiply 7 times 1. 7 times 1 gives me 7, and 2 times 3 gives me 6. That's an improper fraction, right? It's top heavy. The 7's too big. So I know I'm going to convert it. I'm going to take the top off by dividing. 7 divided by 6. So 6 goes into 7 one time, which does give me 6. So I have a remainder of 1. And once again, the 1 is my remainder, so it's going to become my numerator. And the 6 is my divisor, so it becomes my denominator. So I end up with an answer of 1 and 1/6. Hopefully you did okay. If you didn't, do you see where your mistake was? And if you don't see where your mistake was, just raise your hand and let me know so I can come and help you. All right, so as we continue on then, we have to apply what we understand into these math problems where there are questions that are being asked. So part A just simply says to write and solve an equation. So going back to the idea of division that we did several weeks ago, then we know that when we have something, then I'm going to divide it into the groupings that we're talking about, right? So as I'm reading through the problem, I have to understand what is being said. And remember, sometimes they're just going to have extra information in there to confuse you. Don't let them confuse you. Look for what you have, has, or had, right? So when I first start, this problem says there is, so I know I have it, 5-6 pounds of sugar. And it's left in the canister. So each batch of cookies requires, so there's my groupings, 1/4 pound of sugar. He wants to deliver one batch to each of his neighbors. How many neighbors will receive cookies? So I'm looking for the have, which is the 5/6. Then I'm looking for the groupings that I put it into, and that's my 1/4. Then I want to look at the final answer, which is, well, how many people will receive one batch of cookies? So when I set up my math, I know I'm going to start with what I have. That's my 5/6. I'm going to divide it into my equal groupings, which is my 1/4. I know I can't divide fractions, so I'm going to KFC it. I keep my first one. I'm going to change my 1/4. I'm going to flip it into 4 over 1. And then I'm going to change my division into multiplication. I see that 4 and 6 are even, so I know I can cross reduce those. 2 will always go into an even number, so I'm going to take 2 into 6, which is 3, and 2 into 4, which is 2. Is there anything else I can cross reduce? Nope, that's all I have. So I'm just going to multiply across. So I end up with 5 times 2, which is 10, and 3 times 1, which is 3. Now I have to convert it because it's top heavy. So I'm going to take my 10 and divide it by 3. Well, 3 goes into 10 3 times because that's 9. I have 1 left over, which is 1, and my numerator. And then 3 is my divisor, so that's my 3 in the denominator. So I could make 3 1/3 batches. However, when I look at that question, how many neighbors are going to receive a batch of cookies, right? You don't want to be the friend that's out in the side and you only get 1/3 batch of a cookie when everyone else gets an entire batch of cookies. So when I look at what is being asked, I want to make sure that I can answer the question that's being asked. I can only make 3 batches of cookies. The 1/3, maybe he'll keep for himself. All right, so when I look at this one and it's talking about colors, then I'm still looking for what I have and what the groupings are that I'm going to put it into. So if I know I have 3 gallons of blue paint and that she needs 1/6 gallons for each of her new colors, it says to interpret this quotient. So write and solve the problem and then interpret it. Tell how many batches or new colors that she can make. So when I start out and I know I have 3/4, I'm going to divide that into groups of 1/6 for each of my new colors. And then I'm going to go through my same process. I'm going to KFC it. I'm going to keep my 3/4. I'm going to flip my second fraction, so I end up with 6/1. I look to see if I can cross reduce, and I can because I have 4 and 6. And once again, those are both even, so 2 will go into both of them. So 2 will go into 4 2 times, and 2 will go into 6 3 times. And then I'm left with just simply multiplying across. 3 times 3 gives me a numerator of 9, and 2 times 1 gives me a denominator of 2. It's top heavy, so I have to convert it. So I'm going to take my top number, I'm going to put it inside my division box, and then I'm going to divide by my denominator. So 9 divided by 2 gives me a total of 4, because 4 times 2 is 8. I know that I have a remainder of 1, so that's going to be my numerator. And then my divisor is 2, that's going to be my denominator. So I can make 4 1/2 sections of new paint. However, 1/2 is not going to be what I need in order to make a new color. So when it comes to what I truly can make, then I can only make 4 sections out of the blue paint in order to make the new colors. All right. All right, so we have a check here on page 170. Notice it says to write a story. Once again, I'm not worried about you being able to write a division story to solve a problem. What I'm worried about is that you understand I can put this into real life context, but then I can think about the question that's being asked and find the answer. So don't worry about it, but I do want you to solve the problem. So go ahead and pause the video, solve your problem, and then come back and check to make sure you did it correct. So hopefully you have an answer, and hopefully you started with writing your problem of 5/6. You know that you can't divide fractions, so you followed your pattern of KFC. You keep your first one, and then you know you're going to flip your second one, so 12 or 1/12 becomes 12/1. And then I know I can't divide, so you change your division into multiplication. Then, if I look at it, I know that I have 6 and 12. They're both even. So I could reduce it by 2s. If I reduced it by 2s, my 6 would become 3, and my 12, excuse me, would become 6. But then I could reduce by 3s, and I'd end up with 1 and 2. Where if I just simply reduce by 6 and do it in one step, then I'm going to end up with 6 goes into 6 once, and 6 goes into 12 twice. Then when I'm left with multiplying across, I simply have 5 times 2, which is 10, and 1 times 1, which is 1. Now, if you didn't cross reduce, which once again, you don't have to, I'm just trying to show you how to do it because it will make life easier. You could have taken 5 times 12, which gave you a numerator of 60, and 1 times 6, which gave you a denominator of 6. And then when you divided those, well, 6 goes into 60 10 times. So you should be able to still end up with the exact same answer that I did. Either way, as long as you're successful, that's what's important to me. Now, if you didn't get to 10 and you don't see where your mistake was, please raise your hand and ask for help. We're happy to help you. That's what we want to be able to do. All right, so I've given you a separate sheet of paper for a new check that I want you to do. Once again, I don't care if you can write yourself a division story or not. That's not what's important to me. What's important to me is that you can apply information, follow all the different steps in which we've taught and gone through, and successfully get to the right answer, but then to think about the answer compared to the story problem that's being presented. So I've given you this separate sheet of paper, and I want you to truly try and persevere. Please understand that you can truly do this because there's nothing on this problem that I haven't already taught you and that you probably didn't already get taught in 5th grade. So just try. So the problem, it's one that I really don't know much about it, other than I looked it up for Harry Potter and was thinking about potions and Halloween. So I came up with this particular question, and I'll read it to you so you understand what's being asked. Horse Slughorn wants to make individual portions of 3 specific potions. The amount of each potion is shown in the table. Each individual portion will be 1/6 of a vial. How many more portions of Mandrake Restorative Drought can he make than Confusing Concoction? So a lot of big fancy words that are there just designed to confuse you. Simply look at the chart, find the information, and persevere to find the answer. There's multiple steps to this question, but I know you can do it if you truly are determined to try. So pause the video, come back, and I'll walk you through the answer. All right, so hopefully you looked at it and you started looking, and one of the things you notice is that I put the number 3 in there, and I didn't want you to use the number 3. I put it in there to try to confuse you, as well as these big fancy words, just to make sure that you would try to do the math, right? So we know that each individual portion will be 1/6 of a vial. So that's what I am going to put it into when it comes to my groups. Now I need to know, well, what is it that I have? Well, we're looking at the Mandrake Restorative, so that's 9/10 of a beaker. And I'm looking at the Confusing Concoction, which is 3/4 of a beaker. So when I go to do the math, then I have to find how many portions in 1/6 of a vial I can get from each of those. So I'm going to start with the Mandrake because it says how many more portions of the Mandrake Restorative would I have compared to the Confusing Concoction. So let's find the Mandrake first. We have 9/10 divided into, once again, the groupings of 1/6. Going through my KFC, I'm going to keep my first one, so I keep the 9/10. I'm going to flip my second one, so 1/6 becomes 6/1. And then I know I can't divide, so I have to change division into multiplication. If I can cross reduce, I want to be able to do that. I see that I have a 6 and a 10. Those are both even, so I am going to cross reduce by 2. 2 will go into 10 5 times, and 2 will go into 6 3 times. Now I'm simply left with multiplication, which I know I can do. I do it by multiplying across, so I'm going to take 9 times 3. Well, 9 times 3 is 27, and 5 times 1, 5 times 1 is 5. That's top heavy, so I know I need to convert it. So I'm going to take 27 and divide it by 5. Well, 5 will go into 27 5 times, and then 5 times 5 is 25. So I know I have a remainder of 2, and then I have 2 in my numerator and 5 in my denominator, because I always put my remainder as my numerator and my divisor as my denominator. So we're looking at, for the Mandrake Restorative, 5 2/5 of the portions. All right. So now I have the Confusing Concoction. I know I have 3/4 of it, and I want to divide it also into 1/6. So I set it up my problem. I'm going to go through my KFC. I keep my first one of 3/4. I'm going to flip my second fraction. Once again, 1/6 becomes 6/1. And I have to change my division into multiplication. I have even numbers again, so I'm going to reduce by 2's, and 2 will go into 4 2 times, 2 will go into 6 3 times, which gives me multiplying across of 9/2. Well, I have to convert it. So I take my 9, I divide it by 2. It looks like my work's going to be behind my image, so I apologize, but you'll still be able to figure it out because 4 times 2 is 8. I have a remainder of 1, and my numerator is always going to be my remainder, so I have 1, and my denominator is always going to be my divisor, so I have a 2. So I found that when it comes to the confusing concoctions, I made 4 1/2. So if I want to know how many more from one to the other I'm going to have, well, then obviously I have to subtract, right? So I have 5 2/5. I'm going to subtract 4 1/2. Well, we talked about reviewing on subtracting. So if I subtract, then I have to find a common denominator. Well, I don't have a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply by opposite denominators. So hopefully you're figuring out that I'm going a little further than I need you to go, but I'm going to show you what some of you probably did. So now I'm going to multiply by my 5s, and I end up with the 2's on the opposite denominator. So I'm going to multiply by the 2's. I know I have to keep my whole number, so the 5 and 4 just simply drag across, and then I multiply. So I have 5 times 2 is 10, and 2 times 2 is 4 for my top numerator. And my denominators, I have 2 times 5 is 10, and 1 times 5 is 5 for my bottom fraction. And then I check to see if I have a common denominator, and I do, so I know I'm going to keep it, and then I subtract. Well, then I can't subtract 5 from 4, right? If I only have 4 fingers, I can't take 5 from it. So then we borrow. 5 becomes 4, and I know I'm carrying over 1 whole, and that 1 whole has to have the same numerator and denominator. So the denominator has to be 10 in order to add them together. So I'm adding 10 tenths. Well, that numerator, 10 plus 4, becomes 14. And now I can subtract. So I have 14 minus 5, which is 9. So I have 9 tenths more, right? 9 tenths left over. But that's not what it's asking. It's not asking you how much is left over. So I went into a lot more steps than was actually needed. So if this was the process that you did, you made it much more complicated than you needed. All I need to know is, well, if I have 5 2/5 and I have 4 1/2, how many more did I make of the one portion compared to the next, right? So when I'm looking at it, I have to think about what's being asked. Because when it came down to it, the fraction remainder parts didn't matter. I knew I could make 5 total vials for the Mandrake restorative and 4 total for the confusing concoctions. And when I subtract those, I end up with 1 more. That's actually my answer, not the 9 tenths. So make sure you're thinking about what it's asking and doing the math that it's asking for. All right, so your assignment is in the book, page 175, questions 1 through 6. You don't need to do number 7. And then on page 176 on the back side, we're going to do 8 and 9. We can skip 10. We're going to do 11 and 12 and skip 13. Please ask questions while you're doing this. I want this to be one of those things that you can truly do successfully to where you understand it so we can continue to move on and you'll do great.